Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're looking at a monumental shift in how India plans to secure its energy future. We're talking about massive financial stakes, cutting-edge technology, and a literal journey to the absolute bottom of the ocean. You see, with our domestic energy demand surging and this heavy reliance on imported oil, the government is gearing up for a totally unprecedented move to turbocharge our offshore exploration. And honestly, the numbers we're dealing with today are absolutely staggering.
But before we dive into the government's grand plan, just think about this for a second. How much does it actually cost to just look for oil at the bottom of the ocean? Not to extract it, mind you, but just to drill a single exploratory hole to see if there's anything even down there. Finding offshore oil and gas is notoriously difficult, it's incredibly risky, and as we're about to see, it requires pockets that are literally deeper than the oceans themselves.
Section 1. India's Deepwater Dilemma.
Section 2. The Billion Rupee Gamble.
Okay, let's dive into this. India has a massive and rapidly growing appetite for energy. But the upstream reforms we've tried over the past decade, well, they haven't exactly done the trick to attract the necessary global oil firms and foreign investment. Why? Well, because all the easy oil is already gone. So the focus has to shift to deepwater and ultra-deepwater exploration to find new reserves. But operating at those extreme depths requires super advanced technologies and an enormous appetite for risk. Things that really only the heavy hitters of the global energy sector bring to the table. And here is the harsh financial reality that keeps those global companies away. A single deepwater exploratory well can cost anywhere between 1,000 and 1,200 crore rupees, depending on the geological complexity. And if we're talking about ultra-deepwater wells, you can easily add a few hundred crores more on top of that. And remember, this is an investment required before any commercial discovery is even confirmed. It's a massive billion-rupee gamble just to take a peek under the seafloor.
And that massive upfront cost, it basically paralyzes the current system. Right now, companies bid on exploration blocks and agree to what's called a minimum work program. First, they run their initial 3D or 2D seismic surveys. But what happens if that seismic data points to a really low probability of actually finding commercial oil? The companies look at that 1,200 crore rupee drill cost and they just balk. Instead of facing strict regulatory penalties for not completing their agreed-upon drilling, or worse, sinking hundreds of crores into a high-risk dry well, they often just surrender the exploration block entirely and walk away. The risk is just way too immense for them to take on alone.
Section 3. Project Samudra Manthan.
So, this current setup is causing a massive deadlock. Enter the central government and the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. They're putting together the National Deepwater Exploration Mission, appropriately named Project Samudra Manthan. The core philosophy here is actually pretty simple, but it is absolutely revolutionary for India's oil sector. If the financial risk is too big for private and foreign companies to swallow alone, well, the government is going to step in and share that burden. They basically want to radically reduce the exploration risk to finally attract those global companies that have the specialized deep water expertise and the proprietary technology that India desperately needs.
And they are backing this up with some serious capital. The incentive package currently being drawn up is worth an estimated 80,000 crore rupees. Yep, 80,000 crore. This massive proposal is being discussed across ministries right now before it heads to the cabinet. But if it gets approved, it represents one of the most aggressive pushes for energy exploration in the country's entire history. It sends a very clear signal to the world that India is completely serious about tapping its unexplored ocean depths.
And this brilliantly illustrates the shift in strategy. It is literally night and day. Under the proposed new regime, the government isn't just lowering penalties, they plan to actually reimburse up to 50% of the cost of drilling these deepwater exploratory wells. On top of that, officials are also looking into partly funding the 3D seismic surveys that happen before the drilling even starts. The government is essentially saying, hey, we'll split the bill, all to get these wells drilled and overcome that initial hesitation from global explorers.
Section 4. Rewards and Risks.
Looking at this from an Indian perspective, the sheer scale of this incentive is explicitly designed to finally lure in that elusive global tech and foreign capital. This is a huge deal because foreign majors possess the proprietary drilling technology and operational experience that India currently lacks. Plus, alongside these cash incentives, the government has been heavily investing in gathering offshore 2D seismic data, and they are now allowing private companies to reprocess older legacy data sets using new tech. That means much better geological information for everyone across the board. And honestly, we are already seeing real momentum. The state-run ONGC has literally just spudded, meaning they've actually begun drilling its first deepwater exploratory well under this Samudra Manthan program.
But look, an intervention of this scale is definitely going to have its detractors, and we absolutely have to look at the massive risks involved here.
We're talking about utilizing taxpayer funds to reimburse highly speculative corporate drilling. There's a very real fear of cost overruns, which is exactly why the government plans to put a strict spending limit, basically a cap, on the funding for each individual well. Furthermore, those existing strict penalties for failing to meet minimum work programs, those are going to remain in place. So while the government is stepping up to share the financial risk of drilling, the operational risks and the potential for massive sunk cost on completely unviable blocks still loom incredibly large.
Section 5. The final verdict.
Because the clock is ticking on this right now. Through the ongoing open acreage licensing program, the government is actively auctioning off 18 deepwater and ultra-deepwater blocks. Bidders have until September 17, 2026. So the strategic goal here is clearly to have this massive 80,000 crore rupee incentive proposal finalized, approved, and fully enacted before this ongoing auction process concludes. Doing that is what will hopefully give those global companies the financial confidence they need to actually sign on the dotted line.
Which brings us to a really fascinating final thought. By shifting from a purely penalty-based regime to this new co-funding model, the government is essentially betting that a massive upfront public investment today is going to unlock decades of energy security for tomorrow. But with dry wells costing upwards of 1,000 crores each, it is a very high-stakes game of roulette. So, what do you think? Is this 80,000 crore taxpayer gamble the right move to secure India's energy future? It's a huge question, and the results of these upcoming auctions are going to give us our first real answer. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this helped you grasp the immense scale of Project Samudra Manthan.